Вітаю вас на міжнародній діджитал-конференції для дітей та підлітків, які захоплюються медіа, а також дорослих, які працюють з цією аудиторією у сфері медіа та інформаційної грамотності. З нами вже на зв'язку з Лондона Бен Mundy, який розкаже, як створювати серйозний контент для молоді. Друзі, а поки що ми з'єднуємося із Беном. Я хочу наголосити на тому, що наш проект реалізується в рамках проекту підтримки суспільного мовлення в Україні, який фінансується Європейським Союзом в Україні, Європейською комісією, Генеральний директорат з питань європейської політики суспільства і переговорів з розширення та Міністерством закордонних справ Німеччини. Deutsche Welle Akademie співпрацює з BBC Media Action, аби підтримати трансформацію державного мовника України НСТУ у суспільного мовника. Ключовою метою проєкту є промоція суспільного мовлення завдяки створенню функціональної цифрової мультиплатформи Newsroom та навчального центру Академія суспільного мовлення Public Media Academy. Hi, Ben. So glad to see you. Greetings from Kiev. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Пане режисер, будь ласка, перевірте наш звук, адже я не чую зовсім Бена. I know that you've just finished your work and ready to speak to us. Actually, BBC, news about Lady Gaga, Donald Trump, sports, weather. It seems like you're fully involved in all range of views all over the world and know exactly how to present complicated information that will be observed even by youth. So I'm happy to give you the word, and please start.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. We have just finished our program. We've just come off air. And yes, there were a range of topics from stories in the US to a developing story here in the UK regarding a football program. So yes, a wide range. I am the senior presenter at Newsbeat, the news service for BBC Radio 1 and 1 Extra. And for those of you who don't know, Newsbeat is the flagship youth program for BBC News. It is the most listened to news service for 16 to 24-year-olds across all of BBC News. So remember that age bracket there, 16 to 24-year-olds, and we reach around 8 million people each week.
This is enormously great. So Ben, please, your word. Tell us the main tips and advices. We're waiting.
I think the main thing is to be in contact with your audience, to hear their stories and make sure you're reflecting their lives, whether that is on the radio or on social media or through online pieces. And we are multi-platform, as are many people across the world now, but with that target audience of 16 to 24-year-olds, we really need to be reaching across all of those media platforms. So, for instance, since merging with BBC News Online, Newsbeat digital content on the site regularly achieves 4 to 5 million views a week, and original journalism is at the heart of everything we do. Yes, we reflect what is going on around the world and here in the UK, but we strive to get our own stories that are target for that 16 to 24-year-old listener, and make sure we are reflecting what is going on in their lives. So in a moment, I'm going to play you a couple of examples of our work. But first, I wanted to take you through a small PowerPoint presentation, a few slides. So if we can, hopefully the PowerPoint presentation will appear. Or maybe not. We are just waiting for that PowerPoint. Hopefully that will be shown in just a few moments.
Ben?
Yes, hello.
We have got several technical problems, so we please ask, can you share the presentation by yourself?
Yes, here we go. Let's try this. So I'm hoping you can see the PowerPoint presentation. Can you?
Not yet. We're still waiting. Бен зараз намагається розшарити свою презентацію, аби ми її побачили. Ben, perhaps now, till we're waiting, you'll tell us about your day-to-day.
Yeah, I think
When did
we're going to have to
As I
scrap
know
the
that
PowerPoint
just you
presentation.
finished your work over news.
Yeah, so we provide two 15-minute programs on BBC Radio 1 and BBC One Extra. They are a lunchtime program and an evening program. They differ because of the changing news agenda through the day. And we often find that our tea time program, our evening program, has a better sound to it because of the development over the day, finding better case studies and reflecting what we did at lunchtime and then build upon. So yes, we have just come off air and we are now working towards that evening program, and we do news updates every hour at 1/2 the hour, 2-minute bulletins, so short news bulletins.
That's so interesting. How many people work over one pack of news?
Well, at the moment, most of our reporters, due to the coronavirus pandemic, are working from home. In the office, we are operating with 4 to 5 people, and then we have a group of reporters at home working via different mediums, and also they are working towards our online offering and our radio offering. So as I was mentioning, obviously with that 16 to 24-year-old age bracket, we have to be on several platforms.
That's a huge work actually that you're doing. And how much time does it take to prepare one news?
Our 15-minute program, we start around about 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, and then we are on air at 12:45. So we have about 3-4 hours to find the case studies, interview, write scripts, and then put it all together. And I think the great thing about Newsbeat is that it offers news in a completely different way. It has a completely different sound, and that is what we achieve over those few hours, molding what our reporters can gather into something rather unique. It's not like anything you hear on any other mainstream news service, especially here in the UK.
Just incredible job. Нарешті ми бачимо презентацію. Ben, we are ready.
Amazing.
Please start. Yes.
The presentation is there. Can I see it as well?
I see the slide. The media landscape is changing and audiences are spending less and less time with linear broadcasters.
Yeah, so because like everyone in the media, we are finding the habits of our audience, especially the youth audience that we target, 16 to 24-year-olds, constantly changing. So we are evolving as a department all the time. And if you move to the second slide, you'll see we have to evolve and make sure we know what it is they are looking for. So we have regular audience research. We are very much in touch with our audience through a specific department and also our own reporters. We are out on the streets. We are in conversation with those reporters all of the time so that we can make sure that we are hearing what they want to hear, what they want to read. So we are very much in conversation with those. And it's not just Newsbeat. Hopefully, if you move on to slide 3, it is not just Newsbeat. It's the whole media landscape. We are all vying for that attention from the audience. We all need to make sure that we have what we need to see. So then, if you move to slide 4, Radio 1 Newsbeat reaches over a quarter of 16 to 34-year-olds on average each week. Our radio platform, a music-based station, will always give us a shop window to attract listeners to news. We often find the radio audience comes to Radio 1 and 1 Extra for the music, for the presentation. And then, as a result of that, we keep hold of them and get them to listen to our news, which is why we reach that demographic on a regular basis. So slide 5, constant question that we ask here at Newsbeat: how can we encourage more young people to come to BBC News? And slide 6 hopefully has some of the answers to that. So 1, new relevant stories, more relevant stories, including important positive news. Our audience, 16 to 30-year-olds, crave positive news. And given the pandemic that we are living in right now, more so than ever, that positive news is important. Another way we can attract that audience: more accessible tone and style. And I have an example to play you shortly regarding that tone that we're talking about there. Like I said earlier, it's not similar to any other news outlet in the UK. It's more of a conversation. Someone said to me the other day, Newsbeat is like your older brother talking to that younger audience. And then the third way: useful and easy to find every day. So easy to find on the radio. I talked to you about the music station attracting the listeners and then they find the news, but then also our online content. So whether that be our website page sitting on the BBC News website or our social media, and making sure that we are reaching the audience that way. And then the next slide, we typically find that the big stories are consistent across all demographic groups. So if it is a big news story, it doesn't matter. Our 16 to 30-year-olds want to hear about those stories. There's just a few examples there. The man fixing the tire in the snow is a real example of how our audience especially craves news about the weather, whether it's too hot or whether it's too cold. And then the next slide. Beyond the top stories that we mentioned just there, there are specific areas that young audiences tend to be relatively more interested in. And again, that mention of important positive news. Can't emphasize that enough. Our audience craves positive news. They're also very big on the climate change and the environment. Again, international news. Mental health is a very big one for us. And then the fifth one there, gender, sexuality, and LGBT issues. So let's move to the next slide. We have to be very careful with the tone, the scripting, and the starting point of a story. So explaining the significance and relevance. We never assume knowledge. I think that's very important when it comes to broadcasting or reaching youth audiences. Do not assume knowledge, but also when you are explaining something, make sure you're explaining in a way that doesn't patronize the audience. It's crucial in adding relevance to the stories and making them digestible. And where relevant, make it land in their day-to-day. Give them an example of how the big, significant news story will affect them. Next slide. Brexit. Pre-coronavirus pandemic, it was a real challenge for our reporters, our presenters here at Newsbeat. It's complicated, it's thick, and as audience understanding slipped because of the story evolving and getting more and more complicated, we had to evolve our explaining and storytelling. Young audiences are interested in Brexit. It's going to affect their lives, arguably more than anyone else. And they come to the BBC for the coverage in really busy moments of the story. So it's important that we get that tone right on a story as complicated as Brexit, but also do not patronize the audience. Next slide. Now, one of the ways we get stories across to our young audience here at Newsbeat is by using the listeners. Their stories help us tell the bigger story. So, for example, whether that's a 19-year-old who's lost their father to coronavirus, or a farmer who needs an element of the Brexit negotiations to go a certain way so his business stays working. So we always turn it on its head, find the audience and find their stories to help us explain the bigger picture. I hope that makes sense. Next slide. Now this slide demonstrates the role we have on social media. As I mentioned, it's not just radio for us. This is a really important tool in attracting that new youth audience. So I'll let you just take a moment to see that. I'm hoping you can still see these slides. And then that online presence is further demonstrated here. Newsbeat, the program we work towards, currently sees around 4 million UK browsers to its content on BBC News online. And that is really important there. This is an example of how BBC News as a whole uses Newsbeat, its youth audience branch, as a way of attracting that younger audience and new audience to the BBC as a whole. Next slide. Newsbeat obviously has a presence on BBC News Online, as I mentioned, and the major social media platforms. So there are 3 there, and we will use them as a program. We will use the different social media platforms in different ways, depending on what we want from our content, where we want our content to go, and how our content is made. Next slide. So Newsbeat tailors content to make it appropriate to each platform. As I mentioned there, we will take a story in its early form and at the very outset decide where that will go. It might be it is multimedia platform, therefore it goes on social media, it runs as a website piece, it also features on the radio. Or it might be a subject that we decide really suits a social media video, and that is where it ends up, and we ignore the other 2 parts of our output. And then final slide, any questions, which I'm happy to take in a moment, but I was hoping to be able to play you a couple of bits of audio from our Newsbeat program. Do we have those? We do have the audio, I hope. So the first bit of audio I would like to play, if possible, we mentioned that we provide clarity on international news stories, explaining the world to our audience. Well, the upcoming US election in November provides another challenge for us. And I want you to listen to this from Kat Collins, one of our reporters here, on that presidential race. Hopefully we can play this now.
Ben, sorry for interrupting, but if
okay.
you're ready, we can turn on the audio file.
Cheers for looking after the usual Newsbeat. I haven't been slacking. I've been working this morning very hard. We're on BBC Sounds with Newsbeat Plus on Results Day, and we have Rachel King.
Hi.
Who is like the best careers advisor ever. Official
I'm so happy you're saying that. I'm so happy.
Change all your social media.
I'm going to.
Tell us what.
Other case studies, other people's situations. Come and listen. It's great.
Here's just a bit.
I got BBC and an A star on my UPQ.
Put down as my
first choice Sussex, and I was really happy to find out that I got in.
Yeah, I got a triple distinction star, so I got my predicted grade.
Don't go calling up the exam board and saying, I'm really angry, I got this knock result, I was predicted this. It's not going to get you anywhere, okay? So the school has to do it on your behalf.
Or if you decide you want to apply somewhere else, you'll see you've got a clearing number, and you'll also need your personal ID number.
Just have an open mind and be open to different ideas. So I'm going to Newcastle to the Alchemist for a few drinks.
Do teachers go to the pub on results day?
We should be, absolutely.
Oh, Rachel, it's so much fun.
I know.
Where do people find Newsbeat Plus?
I don't know.
Oh, I'll tell you. You go to BBC Sounds app.
Well, actually, I do know this,
Right.
but I think it's better coming from you. I don't want to tell them to click on something wrong.
Okay.
And then it's wrong.
You go to the BBC Sounds app. I'm sure you've got it. If you're not, download it. It's
Yeah.
the little orange icon, and you search for Newsbeat Plus.
Oh, great.
Easy.
Yeah.
Are we playing the next bit of audio?
Будь ласка, поставте наступне. Ben, actually, while we're waiting for the second audio file, perhaps you can tell us something more about your work.
Yes, most certainly. So the audio you heard there was actually an example of the tone that I was talking about. It was on results day. We have some exam results out for our students in the UK in the last couple of weeks. And that was about offering advice to those students about what to do next. And the lady you heard from there alongside myself was a careers advisor. And I used that example to play to you there for as an example of the tone, of that chatty tone. There was laughter, there were a few mistakes, and we kept all of that audio for our program, reflecting what our audience were talking about, but also, as I said earlier, doing it in a way that comes across, hopefully, as that older brother approach to the younger audience.
Ben, we are ready to listen to the second audio file.
And this second audio file is the piece on the US presidential election coming up in November.
BBC Newsbeat. After nearly 4 years of this,
we're going to build the wall. We are fighting the fake news. Make America great again.
This November, America will decide if it wants another 4 years of President Trump. This is News Pat Collins with
Party. Well, thank you very, very much.
Joe Biden will face Donald Trump in the presidential election. Normally, the announcement comes in front of a huge crowd, but this year with coronavirus, it was on a massive video call. Think Eurovision.
It's time to begin our virtual trip around America.
50 votes for our next president of the United States, Mr. Joseph R.
He spent nearly 50 years in politics and tried to become a presidential candidate twice before. But in 2008, he found a different way into the White House with President Obama.
The next Vice President of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
Now, though, he's won enough support from Democrats to go for the top job himself.
If we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation.
Recently, Joe Biden faced claims of inappropriately touching female voters in the past. He says he now accepts standards have changed. He's also made history choosing a woman of colour as his running mate.
I'm in this race to win, and with that guy right there.
If he wins, Kamala Harris will be America's first ever vice president who's not white, and their first ever woman in the job. At the age of 77, the polls suggest Joe Biden does have enough support to become America's oldest ever president. But polls aren't always reliable and things could change. Donald Trump's not worried, though.
I don't see him as a threat. I think he's only a threat to himself.
So that is an example of taking an international news story and making it as accessible as possible to our young audience here in the UK. And with something like the US presidential election that has a long run up to it, it's important that at no point during the story we leave any of the audience behind. So we will be dipping in and out of the US presidential election all the way up to November and beyond, and explaining to our UK-based audience exactly what is going on in America.
So Ben, can we continue our talk? Because we've got
Yes,
already
please do.
several questions
If you have
for
any
you.
questions.
Yes, of course. There are lots of them. So the first one, there are tons of news every day. How do you choose the main? What are the features of good news for you?
It's a very good question. We start every day here at Newsbeat with an editorial meeting. It starts very early. It's the majority of the team, and we focus on all of our platforms, so online, social media, and the radio. As I mentioned previously, we look at what stories and treatments will work for different platforms. For us, when it comes to the radio side of things, it is all about the treatment. So if someone pitches a story or suggests a story, whether that be unique to the Newsbeat audience or an international story, we will always ask, how will it sound on the radio? What do we hear in the 2 or 3 minutes that your piece or your story is on the radio? So we are always looking for treatments. What we sometimes find is pitches where someone has read the first 4 paragraphs of a news story and pitches that in our morning meeting. What we are looking for is how we make those 4 paragraphs relative to our young Newsbeat audience.
Cool. There are lots of fakes and propaganda nowadays. What news should I start from in the morning to be aware of everything?
We're very lucky here at the BBC that we have a reality check team, a team that very quickly get to the bottom of stories when it comes to facts and figures, truths, non-truths. We found this a lot during Brexit last year, pre-coronavirus pandemic, where politicians, certain people were saying certain things, and we were having to have quick turnarounds on checking those facts and figures. And we rely heavily on the BBC's department. So we are very lucky that although we are a strand of BBC News that is for youth audiences, we have the ability to dip into those other areas of the BBC. And BBC's reality check team is certainly one that we rely on a lot. It's what our audience expects from us as well.
Surely. How do you combine news into a one-line agenda? Is there any algorithms of good and bad news quantity in one bag?
No, we always have in the back of our minds that the audience research for this demographic shows they like positive news. So we always have that in the back of our minds. And even when the coronavirus lockdown was on full whack here in the UK and it was a lot of bad news after another, we were always looking for the positive news elements to reflect that in our 15-minute program. I wouldn't say there is any day similar to the previous day. We are very fluid. We change things around. If there's a day full of bad news, unfortunately, that is our job to tell it. We will try and do it in as a creative way as possible. If there's a day of positive news, then we will try and get as much of that into the Newsbeat program as well. So no day is the same, and there's no real pattern to how we do things. I would say that sport is a really important connector for a lot of our audience. So we do always try to make sure there is some element of sport within our 15-minute radio program.
Nowadays, no one wanna read and even listen to long news broadcasted. How can you understand that it's enough? How many bookmarks should be in one news?
Yeah, it's a tough one. just the nature of the industry and media as a whole, that we are all fighting for the ears or the eyes of our audience. I think we have to be distinct and unique and tell news in a completely different way to any other area of mainstream news. Certainly when it comes to BBC News, we are very thoughtful of who we are speaking to and making sure that the news that we provide is for the audience. Like I said at the very start of this, the audience is at the heart of everything we do. And I think as soon as you start forgetting about that, that's when it doesn't quite work. So we always have the audience at the heart of it. And I think if you really focus on that, then you do attract the audience that we're looking for, and you do hopefully keep them interested in the full program or the full article, and you do keep them returning to your product.
What's your favorite media? What is your favorite media?
Well, radio. I present a radio program. It has to be radio. I think for me, in terms of broadcasting, there's nothing quite like radio. I've worked in it a long time. I love the use of audio. I love the relationship you can build with a listener. And in terms of social media, from a journalistic point of view, I'm a big fan of Twitter in terms of getting different thoughts and news very quickly. I think it's an excellent tool when it comes to things like court cases. I also like Instagram for the picture element of things, and we know that our young audience really likes Instagram. I hope that answers that question.
Two more personal questions I have. What's your life schedule? How many hours do you spend by reading and watching news?
That's all I do. We do long shifts here at Newsbeat. We have a long day here, and then outside of work, it's catching up on different news programs. I think the challenge for our team here at Newsbeat is that we like to watch news programs that are obviously targeted towards an older audience. So the challenge we find is that the news that we consume as journalists maybe not quite what our audience need. So we have this constant battle with what the news that we watch in our personal lives. How do we then make that work for the audience that we serve? So I would say I watch a fair bit of news in my spare time, but and read a lot. But it's also important to have a break from news. When you're immersed in it as much as we are in the industry, it's nice to have a break. It's good for your headspace.
So I think you are very broad-minded, but do you analyze somehow the information? Because you need to keep so many things in your head. And you know that sometimes good news is the analytics. How do you work over it? Yeah, that
is a good question. I'm not sure. I think it's retaining the information. You soon get to learn which information you need to retain and which information you can let go. I think it's definitely a trick. There's definitely a skill to being able to do that. And when you do nail it, and I think it differs from story to story as well as to how much you retain as an individual. But when you can retain as much information as possible about a specific story and do your research, it really helps you in the long run. So, for example, the US election, we will do a lot of research. We will look at what our audience requires. We will try to retain as much information as we can, so that when we are writing our scripts and writing our news bulletins, we already have that information there, so that we're not researching and wasting time. So I think it depends on story to story, but I would also add we have a fantastic team here at Newsbeat, and we have plenty of unbelievable researchers who do a lot of work for us.
By the way, how many people do work in your team?
Yeah, overall I would say we have about 30, not all working at once. We work a very different rota pattern. And like I said earlier, we obviously target different areas of the media. So we have people that are bespoke to radio, personnel that work towards our social media offering. I haven't seen lots of them for a long time because of the lockdown we have in the UK. So I haven't seen some of them for 6 months. I miss them.
And what is the average age of your colleagues?
Good question. We find it very important here at Newsbeat that we reflect our audience. So we have a wide range of people that work here. We have some very young journalists that are just starting in the industry. We have some very experienced journalists and some in the middle. But it's really important that we have that balance amongst our team, so that we can reflect our audience, but also have the gravitas to say, hang on, editorially that's not correct, or editorially we need to take it in this direction, or have you thought about this? So yeah, we have a real blend of personnel on the team, but we do have people that are very much in touch with our audience, which is crucial.
I think very interesting question. You told that young and old people have different interests, and this is understandable. They have different political views. You told about Brexit, for instance. How do you choose the tone of presentation? Because sometimes that's really very difficult not to tell your own opinion.
Yes, we are very good at that at the BBC, though, and we have, strict scripting processes. We have sign-offs, so it goes through a series of levels before anything makes it to air. So we will write scripts, and we will then get them checked by a duty editor. If we need to, we can refer up even higher. So we very rarely have a moment, certainly on radio, where we are unscripted. We have a tight program, we have tight news bulletins, everything needs to be scripted and signed off. So we are in a lucky position where we don't have hours of media to fill. So we are very much scripted. But yes, it's a great point about how do you get that tone right, because our audience demographic, 16 to 24, 30-year-olds, if you're at the younger end of that, then your understanding of politics, something like Brexit, is going to be very different to the understanding of a 30-year-old. So we have to strike a balance where we somewhere in the middle, and hopefully don't patronize our older audience or our younger audience.
And by the way, did you have some scandals because of news? Perhaps someone came to your studio and told that why you told this news, why you presented this like that?
No scandals. No, I think what we do here at Newsbeat is, as I mentioned earlier, reflect the audience's stories, and sometimes that involves some very personal stories, some very difficult stories. An example I'll give on that is that during the coronavirus pandemic, we spoke to a 16-year-old TikTok star. She's very big on TikTok, and very sadly her father got coronavirus and was in intensive care here in the UK. And we spoke to her at the very start of him going into intensive care, and she gave this unbelievable interview, very honest for a 16-year-old. She opened up completely about what her family were going through, what her dad was going through. But we have a duty of care to make sure that we are looking after that listener who has opened up and given us their story. And then I think it's credit to the team here at Newsbeat, we returned to her some months later and spoke to her again. So yeah, no scandal, but I think we do make real effort to make sure that we look after our contributors and the way that we broadcast their stories to the nation.
Ben, thank you so much. As for me, I would listen to you hours by hours, but we have lack of time. So I hope to see you soon during our next conference. And
yes,
I
I
wish
hope
you
so.
only
Thanks
good
for having
news
me.
broadcasted.
Thank you for having me. I'm off to go and get ready for the next radio program.
With pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.